Hi, welcome back to another episode of Restoring Aquina. In this episode, we're starting the projects that I'm hoping to work on over this winter to improve the boat for next season. At the end of the last episode, you saw me starting to put up my cover, and it is done now. I have installed this zipper door onto the side, and that makes coming in and out much easier. And then I've also tightened up and cinched down the stern and the bow and taped the ends there. So we're all sealed up inside, so we'll start the episode. So right now I'm removing everything from the deck so that it is ready for paint and so that I can sand it all. So right now I'm getting off these windows. I was fine with the fogginess last season, but since I'm already taking them off, I'm going to replace the plexiglass, and that'll make it look a lot nicer, and I'll probably get these all really nice and shiny. I think that'll make the boat look a lot nicer. So yeah, I'm going to get to removing these. So I'm in the process of sanding the deck, but there's a lot of time spent sanding, and that's not very interesting footage. So I have another project. I want to make a long board for sanding for fairing the deck, which is just a long piece of something. I'm just using plywood that's like semi-flexible, and then you have sandpaper on the bottom, and you move that across the deck, and that gives you a nice flat surface. And that's kind of for like the final honing in, because with the higher gloss finishes you can kind of see if there's like a waviness in the deck. I want to make some handles, so I chuck this piece of mahogany into the lathe, and I'm going to turn some quick handles. So I am now starting to get into the process of sanding down the deck. I've been trying to find as much information I can about it, but there aren't a lot of boats that are in the same situation as mine. Normally a lot of the boats have different localized areas of like spider webbing or cracking like that from like impacts, or like localized area of like stress and bending. But mine is like basically the entire gel coat is just completely cracked. So right now I'm kind of weighing out my options. I do know that I have to sand off all the non-skid for whatever is going on next to have a good surface. So I've started doing that this morning, and I'm also sanding down and fairing in the engine well, and I'm going to be putting a coat of Interlux bilge coat in there, and I think that'll look nice. I've made a couple upgrades to my sanding system, judging that I'm going to be spending a lot of time sanding. First, I grabbed this paint scraper, and I sharpened up the blades, and I went over the deck with this and got most of like the non-skid particles off, just so that like I wouldn't be wearing out my sandpaper discs as fast. So that was good. and it got off some of the paint as well. And then I was using my belt sander, but it was it's not a good belt sander. It's really clunky and like off center, so it's hard to use. And it was ripping belts. So I'm borrowing my dad's belt sander, which is a little bit smaller, but it has dust collection, which is nice. It runs a lot smoother, a lot quieter. And I got a 50 grit belt, and I was running like an 80 before. So I'm hoping this is gonna do a lot more work for me. And then the big thing was I got a 4-gallon Craftsman shop vac, and I was using like a 2.5 before, and my old one was kind of a piece of garbage, unfortunately. But this one is like twice the sucking power, and it's much quieter, so I'm excited for that. So I think I'm gonna start sanding. So I also, a couple days ago, painted the engine well with Interlux bilge coat, as well as the winch lockers. And I did not film this because, as I learned when I was doing the fiberglass repair in the engine well, it's impossible to get a good shot of in there, but it looks good. I also went around with some thickened epoxy and filled the old screw holes for the cockpit combings, because a lot of the screws were starting to spin and kind of had, worn away the holes. So I filled the old ones, and I'm going to re-drill them so that way the screws can really bite in and pull the combings up tight to the sides of the cockpit. There's also a lot of old holes from old hardware up here by the mast step and up on the cabin house, and so I drilled all those out and filled them. There's that one, this one, and this one. And then I also just spread a layer of the thickened epoxy over this mast step, so it's kind of sealed the gel coat. And then I'm gonna fair this, and then start building up my layers of primer on top of that. And that way I'm not gonna be sanding all the way down to completely bare fiberglass. And this is the finished homemade longboard. So I attached the handles that you saw me turn on this block of wood, and then I used a spray adhesive to attach some 80 grit sandpaper. And so this will be kind of like the last final fairing on the deck before painting. I definitely don't want to have to be hand sanding the whole deck, especially when I'm using epoxies and stuff like that, where they're really hard. But basically, I laid up some epoxy over all this to fill in these holes and fill in some of these cracks. So I'd probably hit it with the orbital sander or the belt sander. Being careful not to leave any areas where there's like big gouges and stuff. And then the last bit, I'd come in. And then make sure everything's nice and flat. So we're sitting up in the bow. It's a little windy today. You can kind of see that this area of plastic is still a little bit loose. But last night we had a storm that was like 30 mile an hour winds, 40 miles an hour winds. And cover's fine. So I guess the real test will be when it starts to snow. But so far I've been liking the way it's turned out. So that's going to be it for this episode. So stay tuned for future episodes. We're going to be doing a lot more sanding on the deck and a lot more work on the deck. So yeah, thanks for watching.